Thank you, Kurt. It's great piece to get out this message.
All right, so I'm going to try to walk through really fast on things. So real quick, an overview. We talk about a couple things. Mental health, we talk about stake down stigma. John did a great job talking about that. We'll talk a little bit more at the end. We're very big on coaches education. That's what's makes our foundation a little bit unique, and a focus on competitors. And so what you're going to see is from a presentation that's built for that. And we talk a little bit about the critical role of the coach, the teammate, parent, but I put on the piece here, the coworker. This is not unique just to athletes and coaches. What we're talking about here is stuff and involvement in society. We're not mental health professionals. We've developed this with, support from true mental health experts, and we'll touch on that in a second. But at the end of the day, this is a societal issue. It's a recognition. It's way too pervasive in there. So I appreciated Joy's comments earlier. The same concepts. I think we probably do have a lot of Venn diagram type overlap in there. And we're going to talk about a little bit about education on how to engage in this process. A little bit about the foundation. Our mission is to engage, educate, and involve coaches and key influencers by bringing an awareness of the stigma associated with mental health challenges that can be experienced by competitors, with a goal to help take down the stigma of mental health. So again, I'm on the speedway, so I'll keep moving on things. Breadth of where we've done. So right now, our training is mandatory for all coaches in the Fairfax County school system. So in the past year, we've added 3,000 additional, participants who have gone through our training in there. We've spoken at the National Reconnaissance Office, talk about, because they have as competitor issues, as you can imagine, the intensity of what they do in there. We've spoken at the U.S. Navy helicopter fleet for all the commissioned and non-commissioned officers, to pull them together, because they in the service have the same kind of concept. So you're getting the idea. And then we speak to young men's groups or teams. So it's a really broad place that a lot of these things down. And we speak a lot to parents to help us to take down the stigma series that we work on in there. So a broad piece with common thematics in there. So change begins with a story. I think as you all got in the bio, 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago, lost my son. He was a 21-year-old in college, doing well, had come fresh off being in the NCAA tournament. And there was a triple witching hour night. And one of the, once you have that, you realize it's time to peel backwards and understand what went wrong. And I peeled back that night instantly through text. And part of it was that people were not there that particular moment, because I'm not sure it would have been repeated. It was a tragic, terrible night. But what I also got frustrated with is here was an athlete who had been very involved and had mental health issues. And coaches oftentimes gave the stiff arm to that. We in society oftentimes don't want to deal with it because it's uncomfortable. So how do we make sure that we get a broad set of connections that are out there? And that's what is really the driving force between us. So here's a statistic for you. 49% of adolescents have at some point a diagnosable mental health concern. So if I'm giving a physical presentation, I tell half the room to stand up. That's the number of people. As we sit on this call here, the statistical probability is that half of people on here have had something that's been a real mental health challenge somewhere along the way. 20% have of Americans truly have, more serious diagnosable, and 27 million Americans right now have active mental health issues going on. Problem's not obvious. People are often not willing to share the information. It's a stigma that you don't want to be perceived as weak or weird. And friends are generally not willing to come forward, for that reason, because it's felt in private. We try to take down the stigma and make it okay to talk about it. As John talks about, it's okay to talk about a broken arm. Why are we not talking about a mental health challenge in there? This is a busy slide, but more than half of adults do not receive treatment, for a diagnosed mental health issue. But there are many other statistics that are a little bit frightening on here. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24. Most of the comments that I'll make to your general mental health, but you can't have a conversation about it without talking about suicide in this. because it's the one thing we can't fix later. And the great news is that we've got a 988 suicide and crisis lifeline right now, which I think is going to make a major difference, because it's that part of connectivity in the moment for both, not only for people who are going through crisis, but for people who've got other people they're observing going through crisis, that they can pick up the phone and have somebody to talk to in there. Won't spend time on adolescents, except that, oftentimes it comes with multiple disorders that are going on at the same time once people have a true mental health diagnosis in there. I'm going to do a couple videos here before I start the video. These were impromptu comments, and I'm going to skip over a lot of them again because of the time constraints in here. But I think it gives a little bit of a feeling. This is not a problem that's just left to professionals. It's really an all of us piece in here. So we're going to do a couple of them though here.
Brian, we're not hearing that.
Oh, geez. Is there a way I can do that now? Hold on 1 second, and Holly and I are going to try to fix.
Well, I think, just so while they're figuring it out, this was a webinar that we did involving local Fairfax County sports coaches that's now mandatory in the Fairfax County Public Schools. And we're proud to say, one of our accomplishments, in addition to Melee Till Midnight, has been that it is now mandatory in the Fairfax County Public Schools that you have to take this webinar in order to coach. And we've been able to run through about 4,000 coaches in the last year.
So let me keep going. Let's see if this works. Let me know if it's coming through now. I got to get it back.
Dealing with the relationships, they're dealing with homework, they're dealing with bullying.
Today it is nonstop for kids. And the pressure that comes along with that is so immense. The ability to recognize that. And then, so you're understanding the whys of what goes on in the kid's life every single day, and then being able to respond to it creates a greater relationship between the coach and the athlete, and then ultimately carries forward in that athlete's life that, again, fosters that resiliency, that strength, that inner strength of the student.
Yeah, I think there's so many stresses now with school.
So we talk about the importance in there, and for athletes, and I think competitors, and I know because this is an entrepreneurial group, this is an ultra competitor group. Competitors experience unique stress and intensity and are the least likely to ask for help. So I want that thematic to do next. And then we talk about the leaders, coaches, teammates, especially for high school athletes, have an incredibly unique and impactful relationship with competitors. When we talk about athletes in high school, adolescents, oftentimes you think of them as, this is the push away time, they give them the Heisman, giving parents the Heisman. So oftentimes that coach, somebody that you're working with in another setting, becomes the important person in a life when you're going through things. So each of us has an opportunity to be a leader, a coach, a teammate, to have a powerful influence on how people are going through things. So I'm gonna keep going on this in speed. Our program was developed by, Dr. Deb Wilson, who was a former head coach at Ohio State University, who had players go into crisis, didn't know how to deal with it, and became her life passion, and she now chairs the NCAA Sexual Assault Task Force, the Mental Health Task Force. But one thing she said is always remember a coach or leader that had a major impact, both positively or negatively. People have gone in crisis and got ignored. What a downfall that is. But to have people reach out and accept and be able to do that, is an unbelievable differentiator for people who are important in life. We talk a lot about culture, that, athletes especially see that competition as their primary role when they're going through it, especially as adolescents, and what a team environment's about. We talk a lot about stressors in competition, losing a role, concussions, frankly, and injuries. The multiple competitions, this whole fear of failure, fear of success. But we could go on, but I want to give you, again, I'm trying to give you a snippet flavor of things. We talk about hazing and bullying and how that's still such a huge, huge issue, mainly because of how impactful it ends up being. Many of us have seen people, many of us may have experienced it and understand the downside of that. 71% of the time leading to negative consequences out there. Interesting statistic too is that, when we talk about high school student athletes, they more frequently consume and more than their non-athlete peers when it comes to alcohol and drugs. Again, top of the world's intense competitors, that tends to go hand in hand. So we always bring that out. I'm gonna skip this one.
When I see,
Oh, sorry, but I am gonna play this one here for you all. I think it's good.
I don't think any coach really wants to stigmatize mental health issues. I think all coaches get into coaching to help students. We're just not all sure, exactly how to do that with this topic right here.
Scotty Rowland, won state championships, was a fabulous coach. But at the end of the day, one of the things that we try to do at Foundation is we're going to give tools. So we talk about what does adolescence mean? Just as a reminder, there's nothing probably new here, but it's a time of monosyllabic responses. Yeah, okay, those types of things that goes through there. Where emotional difficulties really start to emerge themselves, peer group issues go in there, et cetera. On that, we teach about the problem signs. Cognitive issues, people who ruminate on things, the withdrawal and isolation, or, the risky behaviors like cutting or self-harm. We're teaching them what to look for out there, recognition. This should be, attention, get a little bit more attention than it might normally get for people. Again, not asking people to become mental health professionals. We're asking them to be recognized, that people are, actively going through things. We talk about depression because it's probably the most common one, where it evolves from and ages, that it's double for females than males, especially the younger age. But, the high incidence rates that go there. And then we talk about that, usually people skirt away, again, a stigma, don't want to talk about it. How are you doing? I'm fine. And at the main time, they're feeling broken, useless, alone, clueless, confused, betrayed. You can go on with an ad infinitum number of feelings that go under that. And a major risk factor for suicide. We talk about that there's multiple pieces of this puzzle. If you look at the left and you just look at the sheer numbers of types of diagnosis that are out there, which have different implications of how things should be dealt with. But there are common things, and that's what we'll talk about here in the level, engagement in there. And to earlier parts, anxiety is not rude. Schizophrenia is not wrong. It's not self-centered. It's any more than a broken leg or the flu is self-centered. We have to make sure that we as a society recognize the things that are going on. So how do we ask people to support? First responders can have a huge impact. It's like anything else in life. When there's a problem, first responders can make just a massive difference. And that's what we want to try to deputize more and more people to become first responders, to give them a chance. We teach a tool. We'll take a couple seconds and do this and talk about this. It's called the LASER tool. Listen, accept, support, refer, and ultimately report. And this is driven more by the adolescent side of things. Listen, we tell people, pay attention, let people who are going through problems tell their story. It's not the story that you need to correct. Many of us, want to move on and snap through things and stuff like that. Oh, it's okay. I think you're a little bit out of line today. Just let's keep going. It's easy. But sometimes we need to step back and just listen and let them use their story, their words. And we need to accept it. If this is their belief or their account, it's their experience, and we need to accept that and suspend judgment in a conversation with people. It's not your job to work with people, we tell coaches, to investigate or adjudicate in that moment or corrective action in that moment. It's their job to accept what's happening in there, listen and accept the value in there. And, at that time, it's also okay to ask about, issues that are critical like suicide, homicide, or violence in there. But it's about acceptance of the story. And then it's about offering support. hey, we're not trying to cheer you up. It's going to be okay. But we are saying we are here for you. You've got people in your corner. You know, I'm here concerned, you know, these are things that, you know, you need to work through. And lend ego strength without trying to direct or dominate, creating a whole environment, the safe space in there. And then lastly, well, I say lastly, the last key piece is the ability to refer. You know, sometimes it's just a balancing act, but sometimes it's to refer. You know, when we talked about high school kids, we talked about, you know, as a counselor, their first line. Is there somebody, a school psychiatrist? Is there a referral source of somebody that you know that can provide help? But think about those things as we're dealing with people. And then there's the reporting aspect of things. You know, this is more for the schools in there. You know, there must be, you know, clear protocols about what to be shared and, you know, conversation. One of the things that we share also is that, you know, you've been put in a trusted advisor role. You must follow up when someone has been fragile or vulnerable. We've had personal relationships where people have unloaded, expressed things. We have to recognize that we're now a trusted piece in there. And one of the things, we don't have to solve things, but as a society, it's really important for us to make sure that we're following up, saying, how's it going? Are you following through, looking at some next steps? If you've been concerned, especially if you've been concerned enough to refer, you know, to somebody on the outside or refer to help, then it's important to just follow up and check in and making sure that something's going on. What you don't want to do is create a situation, you know, where it's a one-stop, I've unloaded and there's nothing follow-up, because then it feels can feel like another follow-on failure, that somebody didn't care enough to follow up. We touch on the suicide risk things to listen for, like I'm going to end it all. If this doesn't happen, I'm just going to kill myself. Who cares if I'm dead or alive? Sadly, many of us have heard these expressions. And then what are we going to do for it? Thinking about what types of things can happen there, the risk factors for suicide. We then ask that, you know, we teach about asking the suicide question. Well, first thing we say is, if you can't ask the suicide question, find someone who can now. You can't let something go on that. You may not feel personally comfortable asking that question. Then find somebody. And the other things we arm people with is you do not increase the risk of suicide by asking directly. In fact, if you don't care enough to ask the question, when somebody is smart enough to realize they've conveyed something that's really exposing in there, you may increase the risk. Again, another sense of failure. Somebody didn't care enough to follow up in there. So we talk about how to ask the question, set up the conversation, talk privately, you know, be patient, calm, be direct. Are you thinking of hurting or killing yourself? You know, those are, you know, open question. It's, you know, going to response. Most of the time, the answer is no, you know, but, you know, we need to recognize the person. We need to give them reinforcement that they're going through. And, you know, for athletes, we talk about you're trying to do something special. You know, entrepreneurs who are really struggling type of thing, you know, have gotten overwhelmed. You know, we need to recognize what they're trying to do, you know, doing something special to work in there. And the goal is to give them a chance to reconsider and get relief to the core issues in there. So we talk a lot about the role of the coach. Again, you know, thinking about a coworker, boss, you know, influencer, be aware, be involved, use the laser to learn how to listen, understand, step back, and build a culture where it's okay to take down the stigma. I'm going to skip the building of the resiliency because I think it's really important in here, but I'm going to, again, over time. We talk about the foundation. We ask people to take what we call take down the stigma pledge. And it includes, I'm going to go through these just very briefly. Start a conversation, talk openly about mental health. It's okay to have an open conversation. Educate yourself. Part of what I'm throwing at you all today is a little bit of small education. Be conscious of language, making sure that it's supportive and not degrading language that goes in there. Encouraging that equality between physical and mental illness. You know, broken arm, you know, a depression types of things needs treatment and to help people through on that. We need to show compassion and acceptance for mental illness, part of life. When I throw up a 49% statistic or a 20% statistic, it's a huge swath of our population. We choose empowerment over shame. You know, these are things that people need to work through. We be honest about treatment. Treatment's hard work. Treatment's hard work. There's no question about that. But we make sure we want to see the person, not the illness. Don't harbor self-stigma. And again, finally, listen, it's their story. Let's help everybody through that. We will finish up when we talk about things like not every problem is serious, but they do deserve attention. We're trying to give tools to help people understand how they work within that, making a regular inquiry to the whole person, involving people and changing the culture. So let me do a video or two here.
You can teach resiliency and build a culture, particularly in athletics, because you're allowed to fail. It's a given that you will fail in athletics. There's no one who walks onto a field, a court, a mat, a pool, name the venue, name the sport, where you don't fail, because it's inherent in the sport. And learning that failure, learning how to overcome the failure, learning how to be resilient, learning how to focus on how can I improve so I don't, in the end, lose or fail, is a huge skill.
I think coaches can make a difference in kids' life when we come to terms with mental health, that we understand I'm not an expert. I'll never be an expert. I don't have a doctorate in psychology or psychiatry. But if we give kids armor, when we build resilience in kids, they're much more likely to find help. As a coach, my job is when I deal with a kid who is dealing with a mental health issue, I'm going to find them help.
Your team will benefit from you having a stronger relationship with your players. They're going to trust you more. They're going to respect you more. They're going to listen more and react better to the things that you're telling them. So that's really critical. These aren't just mental health and suicide prevention skills. These are life skills and youth development skills and just plain old coaching skills.
So our goal is give people a chance. And that's what the foundation is really about. An open conversation, taking down the stigma and giving people a chance in there. We talk a little bit about crisis and concern. Most of the time, good news is concern in what people can do, armor with that. We come back to, basic, fundamentals. Not all problems are serious, but they do deserve attention. Athletes, competitors experience unique stress and intensity and are the least likely to ask for help. And coaches, influencers, coworkers have a unique and powerful, impactful relationship as first responders. Let's see. One more, I'm gonna skip this one.
So I think it's okay to ask for and athletes.
Players and athletes and young student athletes need to be able to talk about mental health issues as easily as they would a sprained wrist or a hurt knee. And until that's done, we have work to do.
Lastly, talk about resources. The simple one I want to leave everybody with is a 988 number out there, and it's powerful. We work with the organization that administers for the state of Virginia, and it's terrific, staffing that goes on that. Resources. Another one last thing, and then I've wrapped up here. Thank you, everyone. And certainly we're open for questions, but I hope the little walkthrough that we did there, helps you have understanding of what we're about as an organization. And frankly, thinking about your own business and lives, there's tools in there that, it's why we share to a much broader audience than, where our target focus is.